On February 14, 1981, more than 800 young people gathered at a disco in Dublin to celebrate Valentine's Day. 48 of them never returned home. Another 214 were injured, many of whom were left with lifelong injuries. For 43 years, their families fought for the truth about what happened that night at the Stardust Club. For 43 years, they heard the same thing. It was arson. No one is to blame. It was only in 2024, after the longest investigation in Irish history, that the truth finally came out. To understand how a night of love turned into a national tragedy, we need to go back to Dublin in the early 1980s, to a world where young people sought happiness in nightclubs, unaware of the price that one seemingly absurd mistake could cost. In 1981, the northern districts of Dublin, Arthur's Gate, Cully, and Bonnybrook, were home to working-class families whose children grew up in modest circumstances, but with big dreams. For the young people of these neighborhoods, nightclubs were the only place where they could feel like stars. Stardust on Kilmore Road was more than just a club. It was a center of youth culture. Built in 1948 as a food factory, the Butterley family converted the building into an entertainment complex. The Silver Swan Pub, the Lantern Rooms event space, and the Stardust nightclub itself. On February 13, 1981, preparations were underway for a special evening. It was a disco on the eve of Valentine's Day, with a dance contest and prizes. Disco music, a BBA, Kool and the Gang, Bee Gees, was supposed to play until morning. The club had obtained special permission to sell alcohol until 2 a.m. by registering the event as a dinner dance. Among the 841 attendees was 19-year-old Susan Morgan from Arthin, who dreamed of a career as a model. There was 17-year-old Michael Barrett from Coolock, the kind of guy who was the life and soul of any party. There was Antoinette Keegan, who came with her sisters Mary, 19, and Martina, 16. They were ordinary young people on an ordinary Saturday night, full of music, laughter, and hopes. The dance contest ended around 1:30. The winners showed off their moves on stage to the cheers of the audience. No one knew that those cries of joy would turn into screams of horror in a few minutes. The Stardust building harbored a deadly combination of factors that had accumulated over years of operation. The Butterley family, who owned the complex, skimped on everything related to safety. The western alcove, where visitors usually gathered, was furnished with polyurethane foam upholstery, a material that emits toxic gases when burned. The walls of the club were covered with synthetic fiber carpet tiles. In a utility room next to the alcove, there were 45 5-gallon barrels of vegetable oil, cleaning products, and polish. Fire exits were regularly locked with chains or blocked. The owners were afraid that visitors would enter without tickets. The windows on the first floor were covered with metal bars that could not be removed without special equipment. The staff had not received fire safety training. But the most dangerous element turned out to be the electric drying cabinet in the main bar, a common device for drying towels and other fabrics. It did not have proper insulation or overheating prevention systems. Numerous electric heating elements were operating in a confined space surrounded by combustible materials. At 1:40 a.m., when the party was in full swing, an electrical malfunction occurred in this cabinet. A spark met the fabric. Heat met oxygen. A process began that could no longer be stopped. The first to notice something was wrong were the guests in the western alcove. They felt an unusual heat. Then they saw a small fire behind the roller blinds that partially concealed the technical area. The flames seemed tiny and controllable. No one could have imagined that in 5 minutes it would engulf the entire club. The staff reacted as logic dictated, but not as their professional training had taught them. One of the bouncers grabbed a fire extinguisher and headed for the western alcove. The DJ grabbed the microphone and began urging patrons to remain calm. Some people moved toward the exits, but most stayed where they were. The fire seemed insignificant. These precious seconds of calm were deceptive. In the technical room, the flames had already reached the carpet tiles on the walls. Synthetic fibers burst into flames one after another, emitting thick black smoke. The fire spread to the polyurethane foam upholstery of the seats in the alcove, 1:43 a.m. The situation changed dramatically. When burning, polyurethane foam releases two deadly gases, carbon monoxide and hydrogen cyanide. The first causes suffocation and loss of consciousness, while the second is extremely dangerous to the body. The air in the club became toxic. The flames, fueled by combustible materials, began to spread rapidly along the walls. The bouncer with the fire extinguisher retreated. The heat became unbearable. The fire reached the ceiling, and part of the ceiling structure collapsed, showering the space with burning particles. 1:45 a.m. The power went out. Stardust was plunged into total darkness. In those critical seconds, 841 people were confronted with a reality that no one was prepared for. The emergency lighting did not work. There were no clear signs to the exits. The minimally trained staff acted chaotically. Some employees tried to open the doors for evacuation, while others closed them, fearing that the influx of oxygen would intensify the flames. The music stopped. Screams of delight were replaced by screams of terror. In 3 minutes, the festive atmosphere turned into a struggle for survival. Toxic gases spread faster than people could comprehend the scale of the danger. In complete darkness, amid smoke and panic, the tragedy of the evacuation began. 841 people rushed to the exits, which turned out to be catastrophically few. Many fire exits were wrapped in chains, formally unlocked before the event, but the chains remained on the handles, giving the impression of locked doors. Visitors stumbled over tables and chairs that had been knocked over in the panic. In the chaos and darkness, people could not see obstacles and fell. Some exits were blocked from the outside. Cars and trash cans were parked too close to the doors. The most serious mistake was the confusion with the restrooms. In the chaos and darkness, many visitors mistook the restroom doors for emergency exits. Dozens of people rushed into the narrow rooms where the windows were too small for evacuation. They were trapped. Antoinette Keegan tried to find her sisters in the smoke and panic. She managed to get out, but Mary and Martina remained inside. Susan Morgan, who dreamed of the catwalk, will never see the spotlight again. Michael Barrett, whose laughter filled any gathering, fell silent forever. Outside, local residents, drawn by the orange glow above the building, rushed to help. They brought ladders and tried to break the windows on the first floor, but the metal bars would not budge. Even when firefighters arrived at 1:51 a.m. and tried to tear down the bars with cables and firefighting equipment, the metal held. Bouncers and surviving visitors grabbed those who tried to return to the burning building for their friends and relatives. "Don't go in there!" they shouted, holding back desperate people from suicidal rescue attempts. The fire department focused on rescuing people rather than extinguishing the fire. They managed to pull about 20 people out of the toilets at the front of the building, but for many others, time had run out. Within minutes, toxic gases had done their work. High concentrations of carbon monoxide and hydrogen cyanide posed the main threat. Many died from toxic gas poisoning rather than from the fire. When the fire was extinguished, the toll was horrific. 48 people died, 41 at the scene and 7 in hospitals. 214 were injured, some seriously. It took more than 2 decades to identify 7 of the victims. Among the dead were 23 women and 25 men. The youngest victim was 16, the oldest 27. The average age of those who died was 19. An entire generation of young Dubliners disappeared in one night. The investigation began immediately. On February 26, 1981, 12 days after the tragedy, a tribunal headed by Judge Ronan Keane was launched. Irish society demanded answers. How could this have happened in the center of Dublin? The investigation revealed shocking safety violations. Blocked exits, flammable materials on the walls, no sprinkler systems, untrained staff. The Butterly family had engaged in what the tribunal called recklessly dangerous practices. Everything pointed to systemic negligence on the part of the owners. But on February 23, 1982, the tribunal delivered an unexpected verdict. The fire was the result of arson. According to Keene's conclusion, one of the visitors deliberately set fire to the club. The owners were completely exonerated. This verdict marked the beginning of a second tragedy, a 43-year struggle for justice. The Butterley family received £580,000 in insurance compensation for damage caused by arson. The families of the victims received paltry sums through the 1986 Compensation Tribunal, between £5,000 and £10,000 for the loss of a child. For the parents, it was not just an insult, it was a denial of their right to the truth. John Keegan, who buried his daughters Mary and Martina, could not accept the arson theory. He founded the Stardust Victims Committee, which became the center of resistance to the official lies. The families organized marches, collected signatures, and met with politicians. In 2006, they prevented the Butterley family from opening a pub on the site of the tragedy. Dozens of people with photos of the deceased children stood as a living wall against cynicism. The first breakthrough came in 2009, when the Attorney General overturned the arson ruling due to lack of evidence. But the families demanded more, a new full investigation to establish the true causes of the tragedy. John Keegan died in 2017 without ever seeing justice. But his daughter Antoinette, who survived the fire and lost her sisters, continued the fight her father had started. In 2019, the Attorney General finally ordered a new inquest. On April 18, 2024, 43 years after the tragedy, Coroner Mareed Foley announced the verdict of the new inquest. All 48 victims died as a result of manslaughter. The fire was caused by an electrical fault in a drying cabinet, and the deaths were due to systemic safety violations. Antoinette Keegan stood in the courtroom with mixed feelings of joy and grief. "Dad was right," she told reporters. "Mary and Martina didn't die in an arson attack. They died because they were let down by those who were supposed to protect them." On April 23, 2024, Prime Minister Simon Harris issued an official apology on behalf of the state. "The system failed you," he told the victims' families. "We regret the pain you have endured and the years you were not believed." In August 2024, the government announced a €24 million compensation scheme for survivors and families of the deceased. The money could not bring back the lives lost, but it symbolized the acknowledgement of the truth. On June 23, 2024, Irish President Michael D. Higgins led a state memorial service for the victims of the Stardust disaster. It was the first official acknowledgement of the tragedy at the state level. Families who had fought alone for decades finally received the support of the entire country. The Stardust tragedy forever changed Ireland's approach to fire safety. Strict requirements were introduced for the use of fire-resistant materials in public buildings, and sprinkler systems and emergency lighting were made mandatory. The practice of locking fire exits was banned by law. Today, 48 names are carved into a memorial park in Bonnybrook, which opened in 1993. Every year on February 14th, families come here to honor the memory of those who left too soon. Granite slabs bear the names of young people whose dreams were cut short on that February night. In 2024, the Gardaí began examining the coroner's report, considering the possibility of criminal prosecution. Although most of the potential defendants are already dead, the principle of justice demands that the process be completed. In Bonnybrook Memorial Park, 48 names are carved in granite for eternity. Susan Morgan never became a model. Her dreams remained on that February night. Michael Barrett will forever remain a 17-year-old boy whose laughter is still remembered by his friends. Mary and Martina Keegan never knew what it was like to be adults, but their names changed Ireland. Their family's 43-year fight for the truth led to reforms that saved thousands of lives. Modern fire safety standards introduced after Stardust have made Ireland one of the safest countries to visit public places. The story of Stardust is a reminder that tragedies don't happen overnight. They build up from a series of small decisions. Cutting corners on fireproofing materials, blocking exits, failing to train staff. Every penny saved can cost a life. Sometimes justice does not come immediately. Sometimes it takes decades to fight for it. But when the truth finally prevailed, it brought with it not only an admission of guilt, but also lessons that will protect future generations. February 14, 1981, did not end with the fire at Stardust. It began a 43-year story of how parental love can defeat lies, and the memory of the dead can change an entire country. The Stardust tragedy happened 44 years ago, but its lessons are still relevant today. In a world where we trust strangers with our safety every day, club owners, movie theaters, shopping malls, every penny saved on fire extinguishers can mean a life lost. The story of the 48 people who died and the 43-year struggle of their families is a reminder that justice does not always come quickly, but it does come if you don't give up. When you next enter a public place, take a look at the fire exits. Check that they are not blocked. Sometimes the difference between tragedy and salvation is just one unlocked door. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story made you think, please like and subscribe to the channel. Take care and see you in the next episodes.